mystery and horror, the air itself is filled with monsters.
Children of the night, what music they make. He's alive! He's alive!
Well, hello, all you monster fiends, and thank you for joining us for another deep dive, factoid-filled episode exploring Hollywood's most famous monsters. I am your mistress of ceremony, Sam, and I am joined, as always, by Dan from Bleeding Marvelous. Say hello, Dan.
I'm in the Kazi.
Oh, here. Just say hello.
Hi.
Hi, Dan. Dan, we're not alone.
There's a strange geezer over there.
There's a guy come to join us. Yeah. So joining us for this very special episode is writer, director, editor, producer, and some of the most loved and appreciated horror movies ever made. Monsters Up North is so happy to welcome Newcastle's very own Neil Marshall.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey. Hi, Neil. Sorry for the very silly voice.
Glad to be here.
No. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the disclaimer out the way with, because we do a disclaimer every episode just to kind of like put our point forward that we don't take no shit. And then we'll crack on and get on with some of the best movies that I have ever seen. So, everything discussed in today's episode is our opinions, and it's our opinions alone. If you'd like to discuss anything from today's episode, please come and join us on our Discord, the Facebook, or the comments section, where we can have an open discussion. But what we won't have is anyone coming for us and telling us our opinions are wrong. We can all agree to disagree in fandom. So let's keep it fun, keep it kind, and keep the toxic behaviour out of nerdism.
Don't be a dick.
It's the shortened version of the
It's
disclaimer.
version. Yeah.
Is
Sums
don't be a
Sums
dick.
it up in one.
Yeah, that's words to live by. That is, don't be a dick.
Exactly.
It's my motto, to be honest.
So Neil, how does a lad from Newcastle get to make these amazing movies? Like, how did that actually become?
A lot of stubborn determination, I think, more than anything. You know, I kind of fell in love with movies from an early age, and because my dad was like big on watching movies. He loves his westerns and stuff like that. But he introduced me to like the Universal monster movies at a very early age. I don't know, I was like 5 or something like that when I first saw Frankenstein or the Wolfman or something. You know, they were playing on BBC Two, you know, late at night, and he was like, you know, you gotta see this stuff. And I just remember being both, you know, in awe of it and terrified by it in equal measure, of just like, this is beautiful and amazing. And so that kind of got me started watching films with him and watching films on the TV. And then I saw Star Wars when I was 7 at the cinema at the Odeon in Newcastle, and that suddenly opened my eyes to going to the cinema and seeing movies then. And you know, I remember that year alone there was things like Star Wars and James Bond, The Spy Who Loved Me. It was like, you know, A Bridge Too Far. It was like, it was an amazing time to go to the cinema as a kid, and I fell in love with going to the movies then. And then later on, when I was 11, I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time, and I saw the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark on TV, and I kind of put 2 and 2 together, of like, well, this is what these people do to make that, and I love that, so I want to do what they do. And luckily, my best mate as well was also a movie fanatic like me, and his mum had a film camera, Super 8 film camera, so yeah, we got hold of that and we started making films. We were like 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, and you know, they're all like hilariously bad, but with me and him acting in them, and you know, and doing like miniature special effects and props and costumes and all sorts. But what a learning experience it was. You know, it was an incredible learning experience. But even then, it was like, you know, I had no clue that it was going to turn into a career. It was like, this is what I'd love to do, but I'm a kid in Newcastle. I'm a million miles away from London, let alone Hollywood. So I didn't really know what the path was to make it a career. and so just had to take it step by step, which ultimately meant, keep on making these things, keep on learning the process. But then I went to art college in Newcastle, did a diploma in graphic design. That got me into the film course at Newcastle. What was Newcastle Polytechnic is now Northumbria University.
Oh, right.
That was like the last year. Well, as soon as we graduated, they changed its name. I think it was like, out with the old, in with the new. And so that enabled me to get onto that course as an animator. But once I was on the course, I changed from an animator to being into live action filmmaking and editing. And then I made a zombie movie as my graduation film.
Of course.
Which again I was going against the grain because it was quite a sort of artsy, pretentious film course.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And the kind of stuff I wanted to do was very much frowned upon. Popular commercial cinema, horror cinema, things like that was really frowned upon. But I did it anyway. I kind of sort of. There was a bunch of us in there that wanted to do like makeup effects and other various bits and pieces for horror movies. And we kind of like just sort of lied and cheated our way through the course. So like we handed in fake scripts and said that we were going to do this and do that. And then they were like, yeah, just have the equipment and go make it. And we went off and made our own thing. And I mean, the actual, the location for the zombie film, we couldn't find anywhere else to do it, so we actually shot it in the department itself in college. But we did it at night when everybody went home, and we'd bribed the caretaker guy to let us in, and so we went into the department and filmed it all there, and then washed all the blood away. And then the next morning we came in, and just like normal. So
did you pass?
So, yeah, and then got that done, and we had a screening of all our graduation films at the Tyneside Cinema. Every year they do a special gala screening of all the students' films, and there were some local producers in the room, and they saw my movie, and it was very different from everybody else's. Like everybody else had made these very kind of artsy black and white things, and then suddenly mine came up, and it was explosions and zombies and gunfire and heads exploding and all sorts. And so they took notice and they offered me an editing job off the back of that. And that was my first kind of step into the business, really, up in Newcastle.
That's crazy. And I only asked, like, when I said, lad from Newcastle, is because we are, like, in the north, like, a million miles away from anything that would, we could even dream of doing. And I know that's going to change very soon with the studio that's being built in Sunderland, but growing up, in the 80s and 90s, them dreams were, like, far out of touch.
Well, it's the strange thing is that in some respects it's better now because the equipment available to people, like you can shoot a movie on your iPhone, and you can edit it on your laptop and all that stuff. That we didn't have any of that. But what we did have at the time was there was a small television industry and a small filmmaking industry in the Northeast, which is all kind of gone now because Time Tease isn't there anymore, and it's just even like local BBC stuff is very rarely local. So there was stuff being actually produced in the Northeast, which that helped enormously. But that sort of got my foot in the door. But I was a freelance editor for the first 10 years before I got to make Dog Soldiers. But actually that was the best education I could ever have as a director, is to be an editor for 10 years. I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to direct. Edit.
But it paid off massively with Dog Soldiers, because that movie is excuse my French, but a fucking masterpiece.
Thank you.
It's really odd because I saw it in the cinema, because I'm not much younger than you, Neil, and I saw it in the cinema, and I was in my almost mid-20s, and I remember sitting there watching it, and it was unlike anything I'd seen before, because obviously I was coming off the back of American Werewolf, and we were used to seeing the quadrupeds rather than the bipeds. So when we saw your version of Now, we're not sure whether we call it a werewolf, a wolfman.
We've been having this debate for some time on this podcast because of the Universal monster with Lon Chaney. He was on his feet and he was known as the Wolfman.
Yes.
And then you've got...
Are yours
werewolves or wolfmen?
Mine are 100% werewolves.
Right.
And the closest comparison would be the ones from The Howling.
Yes.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the Wolfman is the one who has sort of like more human-like features.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the Wolfman, like Lon Chaney, or like even like the more recent Wolfman. It's like the features are still a little bit more human-like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the werewolves go full wolf.
Yeah.
But they retain walking around on two legs.
Yeah.
But so there's a story behind this, which was obviously like the two films that inspired Dog Soldiers in terms of werewolves were The Howling and American Werewolf, in which I always loved. You know, I think American Werewolf is the better film. I love the transformation sequence; it's the best ever. But I always preferred the werewolves in The Howling because I didn't like the fact that in American Werewolf it walked around on four legs. It's like, well, it's just a wolf then, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what's the difference? And so in a few interviews that I did about it, I made this point of saying I didn't like the werewolf in American Werewolf in London. And years later, I was lucky enough to be on the set of Burke and Hare with John Landis.
Yeah.
Mm.
And Landis never mentioned the fact that I said I didn't like his werewolf.
Good job.
Yeah, he never mentioned it at all. But I was sitting at the monitor watching Landis work, and I turn around and there's a guy sitting behind me with like very long white hair in a ponytail, and Landis comes in and says, "Oh, have you met Rick Baker?"
Oh.
And immediately, like, part of me is just like, "Oh my God, Rick Baker," and then part of me is thinking, "Oh shit, Rick Baker." and Rick Baker, like, he takes my hand and he says, "Aren't you the guy who said that the werewolf in American Werewolf in London shouldn't be on four legs?" And I said, "Yeah, that was me." And he stared at me for what felt like an eternity with these like evil eyes.
Yeah.
And then finally stopped and he said, "You're absolutely right. I always wanted it on two legs. It was Landis who wanted it on four legs."
Yeah.
That was a moment.
We recently did a Rick Baker episode, so we covered all the movies that Rick worked on and special effects, and then we did talk about American Werewolf and how he was adamant he wanted it on two legs for sheer ease compared to how they ended up having to film a lot of the wheelbarrow thing. Yeah, the rigging that they had to make up to make it look like it was running. The poor guy that had to be in the suit with his face down on the floor with the whole head purchased on top. But with your guys, were they on stilts? Because they were so big. They were huge. Well,
again, like the original design that I had for the werewolves was like very elegant. That's this a mate of mine had done this drawing of these werewolves, and they looked very kind of elegant about there was some beauty about them, and I was like, oh, I'd love to capture that because I've never seen that before on a film. And so when I was putting all the costumes together, I cast these dancers to be in the suits. I got these dancers from the studio in London. I thought, they'll bring this kind of grace to the movement and this movement to it. But then we then put them on stilts and made them pretty much blind once they had the helmets on. So all of that grace went out the window. They could barely walk. They could barely stand up. They were staggering around all over the place, falling into each other. It was like all my great ideas just went sideways. But yeah, they were. So whenever possible, we would not have them on the stilts if we could get away with it. But half the time. But then the other part of it was I designed the werewolves in the set to not fit. They were slightly taller than the set. So whenever they came inside the house, they would have to kind of stoop over.
Giants.
And I kind of thought that made them look more they get more presence inside the house. But it actually helped them because they could hold onto the roof and move on their stilts a bit more gracefully that way. So by the end of the film, we finally figured out how to make it work, but it was tricky.
I wasn't sure, to be honest, because it did look as to an element of false perspective.
Yeah.
Me being short, I always look up I'm only 5'3", so for me, I always look up. But the way you shot a lot of the shots, it looked like they were from low to high to give the impression they were really large, and that it did look like that it was this, because I watch out for things like that because my brain does it. It looked like, because they were holding onto the beams, it did look like the room could have been slightly smaller and they were taller, or they were really tall. I couldn't work it out. But as a small person always looking up, I'm always looking at things like that. So.
Yeah, when they were at full height on their stilts, they were like 7.5 feet tall. So they were pretty impressive.
They are. That's tall for me as well, and I'm really tall. I need to ask this, Neil, whose idea, and now this might just be my brain and how I looked at them, whose idea was to make the werewolves so adorable looking? Their faces are so, like, I just want to go like that and give them a big squishy cuddle. They didn't look frightening to us, and I don't know if that's just my brain and how I think when I'm looking at horror, but I really liked that. I love the look of them to the point where I was like, oh, I just want to get a big cuddle off them.
I suppose that's what, we just made them look, they were very much like wolves, so wolves are pretty cute.
Yeah.
So I think it was more the fact that it was on a human body is like what makes them creepy, but the heads themselves, they are kind of cute.
Yeah, they're adorable. I texted that because I
You want as a pet?
Yes, massively. I went to the pictures to see this back in 2002 when it came out, but I haven't returned back to it, even though I got told so many. I mean, I've been doing this podcast for 3 years now, the Nerdy Up North one, but the Monsters has just been going for a year. But every time we get on a horror subject, it's Dog Soldiers gets brought up constantly, time and time again. So when I watched it the other day, I was so taken aback at how much this film, it still stands today, all these years later, and it is so beautiful. And your cast is just remarkable. The chemistry that you get off their men, I didn't want to leave them. I didn't want anything to happen to them. I just wanted to stay in them woods and listen to them talk to each other.
No, they were a good bunch of lads, and it was. I mean, we got very lucky with the cast over the putting it together, because it took a long time to make. I mean, from writing the first draft to actually filming it was 6 years,
right?
And at no point did I ever think it wasn't going to get made, but it was a process.
Mm-hmm.
And through that process, we went through various other cast possibilities. Jason Statham was attached at one point to play the lead.
Doing any diving? Was he doing his diving phase then? Was he? He's he just done Lock, Stock. Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Blimey.
He just done Lock, Stock, and I saw him in Lock, Stock, and I thought that guy's going to be a movie star. That guy's got real presence. And so I offered him the lead role in Dog Soldiers. And to his credit, he came on board. He stuck with us for like about a year while we were trying to get the money together. And then he got offered John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars.
Yeah.
And even I was like saying, this is John Carpenter wants you in his movie, man. Just go and do it. You have to go and do it.
Yeah.
I
have opinions on that film. I have a lot of opinions on that film.
Everybody does, but at the time, before it was made, it's like John Carpenter wants you in his new movie. Go and make John Carpenter movie. Why wouldn't you? So he went off to do that, and then we lost him for Dog Soldiers, obviously. I offered Simon Pegg the role of Spoon.
Oh, right, okay.
And that was before Shaun of the Dead. It was like 2 years before Shaun of the Dead. So I'd seen him in Spaced, obviously, and was like, that guy's going to be a movie star.
Yeah.
So I offered him the role, and but again, all power to him. His loyalty was to Edgar. He promised Edgar that Shaun would be his first feature, and he was sticking with that. So I didn't get him either, but instead, I got Kevin McKinnon and I got Darren Morford as Spoon, and like they're both fantastic, and they make the characters their own. So, I won in the end of the day.
You did. Well, we as viewers won, because the ensemble cast in that is just great. Like, Spoon was such a fantastic character, to the point when I was watching Doomsday last night, I kept shouting, "Run, Spoon, run!"
Well, he is. I mean, it's kind of like, because Spoon and Darren are very interchangeable. He's very like that. So it does work that way.
Yeah, Dan got wrong for calling him a Geordie earlier.
Yeah, I know, partly Paul, my fault. I just didn't think it's.
Well, the thing was less about Geordie specifically, but it was like I wanted to get some northern accents in there.
Yeah.
in amongst everything else, because it's like you don't hear them on screen that much, and certainly not in those kind of movies. So it was just like, let's get a whole mix of accents in there.
Well, it worked because it showed the difference between Sean and Sean being a little bit, right, when I put it on, we're very much something and nothings. But it made it like you listened to Sean because you could tell that he had the presence, what he said, and the way Liam also had that knack with his, the way that he had that. Now, Sammy has a thing about Liam's accent, but Liam has this way of literally, he could just sit in a room and your eyes automatically go to Liam because he just...
Yeah, it's fabulous.
He has this scary presence, even when he's playing nice guys, like in Game of Thrones, things like that. He still demands the focus somehow. I don't know what, you just automatically go to him and go, what's he doing?
Liam's got it. Whatever it is, Liam's got it. You know. And for this film, obviously, like, I got him to hide his natural accent. But I had heard him playing sort of very, very English character in something else before, and I was like, oh, well, he'll be great for this. And I don't think at the time I realized he was Irish. So when I spoke to him on the phone, I was just like, whoa, wasn't expecting that. But I think for the character, it worked that he was like a bit of a posh knob. So.
Yeah, and he was so sinister as well. Like from this, it's been a very long time since I've had to cover my ears and hide my eyes. And that opening scene with I call him Owen.
Shoot the dog.
Oh no! I call him Owen because I know him from Owen is great from Grey's Anatomy. Which I was like, is this his like origin story? Because Owen was like he was a vet like in the army. Like, is this like?
Was he? You know, I've never watched Grey's Anatomy, so I have no idea.
You're not missing anything. But he's really good in it. But yeah, Liam's accent at the beginning, I was terrified. Like, just him alone and the way he was speaking was just so scary to the point where I thought, he's going to shoot this dog. That dog's gone. And thank you as well for having me on edge the whole time that you kept a dog in that whole film. And I'm glad it survived. But I was on edge the whole time, thinking that dog's going to bite the dust.
Yeah. Well, I know, because I'd done that at the beginning of the film. It was like, no, we got to make the dog one of the heroes of the film somehow, and he just saved the day. Now, the on screen the dog is cool, and on the film the dog was not so cool. And there's actually two different dogs playing that role because the first one was so terrible we had to fire him and get a new one. You
had to fire a dog.
Yeah.
Amazing. I know you recently did a reunion last year. Was it last year For the Love of Horror? You and Sean.
Alarmingly, it was the year before.
Was it? Because I was working. I was in the trading room because my company
works
there, so I didn't get out to see. But everybody kept saying to me, "You need to go watch the panel. You need to go watch the panel." And we were so busy, I couldn't get out to watch it. So I've watched it on YouTube since.
Right.
And it looks like it was like really nice to all be together because Craig was there, wasn't he? Craig was
there as well. Yeah, it was an absolute blast. It was just and getting a few of us together. Obviously, like there's some of the group that like I can't even locate. We don't even know where they are. Some of the lads, but Craig I've obviously stayed in contact with. Darren is still around. Sean still mates with. Kev's obviously in the States, so he was doing his thing. So we got together as many as we could that day, but it was just great to see everybody. I mean, getting Darren out is quite a feat. So, but he had such a riot. I think he really enjoyed himself.
Yeah, you guys really did look like you had fun when I watched it back, and I think it's one of those things where because it's been, and I hate to use this term, it's been 22 years since the film came out, which it doesn't feel like 22 years, but it's been 22 years. So it's one of those things where you sit back and you think, would they still have the same chemistry if you put them in the same room? Do they feel like a bunch of strangers now? Do they still get on outside that you don't know? And it was so nice to see that it was just like everybody was just like into their places.
I always think, because funnily enough, last night I was interviewing Shauna McDonald from The Descent for this book that we're writing about the making of the movie, and she was saying that her and the girls are still friends to this day as a group. Like, they're still friends to this day, and the same with the boys from Dog Soldiers. And I kind of thought that of all the things that I'd like, as proud as I am of the films, I'm also like super proud that I've created these bunches of friends that are still friends today, and I think that's an achievement of sorts.
It is. Well, when you go on and see like Maya Anna, for example, she's gone into being the Witcher, and you see like when you go back and watch these movies, even though I've watched them for so long, going back and watching them now to just have a little bit of a fresh eyes on them, you tend to see so many people, and you're like, Jesus, that person's gone on to do that. That's gone on to do that. Person's in that, and it's like it is a testament though, because I know you love using the same actors throughout your movies. Like I did ask you once you were on my friend's podcast Be More Super with Brian and Dan, and you showed them the big wolf head, and I asked a question through the live chat, which was, is Craig Conway your lucky mascot? Because you always, in the big three, in the 3Ds, you have him in every one of your movies.
And I mean, it's like, I want to find stuff to work with Craig again, and I always try and get some of these guys in, because I don't know if they're lucky or not, but it's just like it's working with your mates, and that's pretty good. Sean and Craig, they're all like sort of brothers from another mother, so whenever I can work with them, I will. It's just not always possible. 'Cause a lot of my most recent films I've been filming overseas, and just you're always encouraged to, if you bring in actors from the UK, you've got to put them in hotels and stuff like that, and when you're working on super low budgets, it's just not possible. So I haven't managed to get them into the films as much as I would like, but I will do in future, definitely, because it's just such a blast.
Yeah. It looks so
and you were saying before that, how Dog Soldier's still held up, and it's interesting, because I look at it now, and it's like, it's the kind of film you don't see made anymore now, because it is on the edges. We shot it on 16mm. It's kind of grainy. It's just a little bit rough around the edges. Everything, even like low budget films now, are shot on 4K, and they all look quite slick. That level of old school filmmaking is like a hangover from the 70s, and it's gone now. So, but that said, I think both Dog Soldier's Descent and these things, they last the test of time because they're not dated.
Yeah.
I didn't fill them full of like contemporary music and contemporary references. So they feel as fresh now as they did when they were first made, because there's nothing to date them really.
Yeah. The costumes aren't dated. Obviously, army fatigues, and then obviously spelunking gear, and then you've got in Doomsday post-apocalyptic, Mad Max, medieval, Malcolm McDowell. We're going like full on, so you don't know where you are in any timeline, so to speak. I mean, you have your dates at the beginning of 2035, I think, if I remember rightly, and now if I'd have watched that we had a discussion that if we watched that a couple of years ago, we probably would have shit ourselves. You were so
on the nose with the pandemic. I texted Dan last night, and if I watched this during lockdown, that's it. I'd have had to lock the door, and I'd never be coming back out again.
It's funny that I remember watching the news during the first lockdown or whatever, and they closed the border between England and Scotland, like for the first time in hundreds of years. And I was like, it's happening! Doomsday is happening! They're going to build a wall.
It's the fact that you lowered that wall past Newcastle that I was very much like, yes. And then I was like, oh no, that means that we're in the bad part. I'd be in the bad part.
Well, because it always seemed to me that the Romans did a weird thing there of like, I thought you'd use the Tyne as your barrier.
Yeah.
So Newcastle would be north of the wall. Like, why would you build the wall not use the Tyne? I didn't get that. So
you were so on the nose with a lot of things in Doomsday.
It was also I was also planting a seed that if I ever got to make a sequel to Doomsday, I wanted to set some of it in Newcastle for the sequel, but I never got to do that. So there you go.
That's a shame. The car scene that's made 7 years before Mad Max Fury. And I was like, I'm not a big fan of that film. I'm really sorry, but that was done so brilliantly. I was like, he even got it before that film came out. Like, that's amazing.
Well, I just nicked it all from The Road Warrior and stuff like that earlier. So, I just wanted to do one of those kind of chases, because they're a lot of fun.
I love the slogan on the car. Your shit is our bread and butter.
Oh, the Plumbers. Yeah, still Plumbers, man. Your shit is our bread and butter.
It's one of my favourite bits. Literally, I caught it for the first time when I rewatched it, and I was like, "Why is that not on everything? You need more merchandising deals going down." You
Yeah, that was
long ago.
That was my production designer came up with that as a slogan for the plumbing company, and I just thought that's so brilliant. I've got to feature it in the film somehow.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, but go back to the Descent and the creatures. What were they called? Oh, sorry, I've totally
Crawlers.
Crawlers. That's it. Where did the design come from them? Because they are interesting.
That was just like a hybrid of various scary monsters that I liked. From Nosferatu to I wouldn't say Gollum. I didn't, because I never thought he was particularly scary. But Nosferatu. Do you remember the Master in Salem's Lot?
Yeah.
Things like that, of just trying to make something that was much more human, but like just disturbing in many ways. So yeah, so there wasn't a huge amount to them because it's basically face makeup, and then the rest of them is just them with body paint and KY jelly and stuff like that all over them.
Yeah, they looked really slimy.
Yeah,
but
they were exceptionally slimy.
I love the design of them though, and the fact that the contrast between the dark, the rocks and everything, and them makes them stand out so much more to a presence. That is terrifying. Yeah,
it was like, can we make them like pasty white, because there's no vitamin D down there, so they're kind of pasty white, and then big ears because they rely on sound so much. Their eyes are they've gone blind. Their eyes are sort of essentially kind of healing up because they don't use them anymore. And then the nose, because they use their smell quite a bit, but and then teeth because they're carnivorous. So it was just trying to combine all these elements to make this weird albino underground human dweller.
It worked really well. You have a knack though at the beginning of Dog Soldiers and The Descent of setting up a movie to the point where I'm like having to look away from the screen, because The Descent did exactly that with that opening scene. That was some filmmaking there. I was terrified. Like, not terrified, but I jumped a lot.
Well, even stuff like that. Like, I thought, why don't we put the car crash right sort of in the middle of the opening credits?
Mm-hmm.
Because people kind of assume that, the credits are running now. It's safe.
Whew, we can breathe.
It's like right in the middle of the credits. We'll just kill them, kill them dead.
Kill them dead. Yeah. Kill them really dead as well. You did in the beginning of Dog Soldiers. You didn't use a score with Craig's scene in the tent, which I thought was absolutely perfect, because there's no, I always think like a score makes you rely, like it helps you to rely where your emotions should be, and there was nothing there, so that made that tension so much worse. But it was in the Descent.
Wasn't
not intentional.
Just really, it's just what worked best for the film.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great.
I was going to say, because in The Descent, I did notice, was it you that made the choice to have the reds and the greens?
Yes.
Yeah, because that was something that I'd noticed but didn't pay that much attention to until I rewatched it, and how much of it sets the tension, it builds the tension, because when the green's fading out, you feel like something's going to happen. Like you sort of go with the environment. But like the red was so red, but it worked because, like I say, you then get the white of the crawlers going up against the red. And I know a lot of it was filmed on sound stages, wasn't it? Obviously, you couldn't do that in real cave.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, there isn't a real cave in the whole movie.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. I saw a behind the scenes that's doing the rounds on TikTok. Someone did a behind the scenes, so you see Craig dancing dressed as one of the crawlers.
Oh. You're
in it having a conversation with, I think it's Shona and Craig, and they're meeting Craig for the first time, all dressed up. Yeah. Someone like did a little Hatchet like minute version on TikTok, and it's really weird seeing Craig talking and dancing around, and then you've got the other guys who are speaking like Shakespearean actors dressed up like crawlers. So kind of took it off.
Fun bunch of crawlers, fun guys to hang out with.
It was great to watch, because it also gave you that, you could see the sound sets behind, you could see the stages, and the amount of scaffolding, that they must have been some big old sets because of the sheer.
They were pretty big, and they were made out of this new. It was a new technology at the time. This kind of spray-on foam stuff that came out of a big hose pipe. And you built it like a rough structure and then sprayed the foam to it to make it. And you could make various versions of it. There could be like soft, spongy foam. So if we were doing fight sequences, we could use that. Or there was like harder foam for climbing up and things like that. So no, it was amazing set build. But we concluded very early on that there's no way we could have made it in a real cave because somebody would have died. So all would have died. And finding caves that would have worked specifically for the things we needed was impossible as well. So it had to be a set build. But it was all, I think in total there was about 12 sets, but like we reused them. I mean, some of them were literally just like a tiny little tunnel, and another one was like quite big. But we reused them again and again and again and again. I think. No, sorry, there were 8 sets, and I reused one of them 12 times in the film, but you can't tell.
No, you can't.
And it was literally like we'd spray it a different color, or we'd take a big boulder and move it somewhere else. But every time the actors went through, and they were essentially lighting the scenes with their torches, they were never pointing at the same place twice, or never doing the same thing twice. So you had no idea that you were in the same set.
No, it was really good. I've got a question about Doomsday. Because Universal distributed the movie, would you class Sol as a Universal monster?
Yeah, sure. Why not? He's a monster and it's a Universal movie, so why not?
Exactly, you've inadvertently created
Sol and the Gimp, I think.
Yeah.
Sol and the Gimp.
Yeah, if you're going to make an action figure, he needs a sidekick, doesn't he? So
because he leads him around on his little chain. It looks like his little pet.
It's when he punched that guy in the face.
Sol and the Gimp is a new band name, I think.
That is a really cool band name.
That is, yeah, I'd listen to him.
I absolutely adored Craig in that movie, but the minute I found out there were cannibals, I have a thing about cannibals. Even though Silence of the Lambs is one of my favourite films of all time, they still make me go cold inside. And the minute it was like cannibals,
I was going to say, who doesn't have a thing about cannibals? I mean, is there anybody who likes? Yeah, I love cannibals. They're my favorite people.
I know. I get really cold. We did a whole episode on Hannibal Lecter, and I spent the whole entire time with a hoodie pulled down because I couldn't talk about the subject matter we were going through. But Craig was just so fantastic. Like the fact that what was the song he came out to when he was dancing?
Cannibal's Good Thing.
Amazing choice. I was like, yes, that is fantastic.
It's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
It's like, we were location scouting at a theme park in South Africa, which is where we actually shot that whole thing. That whole sequence was shot in this. It was like a food court in the middle of this theme park, and it had a big stage, and and it was a huge space. And while we were scouting the full location, they had Fine Young Cannibals playing over the tannoy system, and I was just like, "That's the song. That we are going to play that song because it's Fine Young Cannibals."
The soundtrack to Doomsday is.
Oh,
how much say do you have in, like, say, the scoring or the soundtrack? Do you have final decision?
As much as possible. I mean, it was all my choice of songs for the movie. I didn't get all the ones I wanted, but I got most of the ones I wanted. I was determined to get Fine Young Cannibals in there, a bit of Adam and the Ants. I had to get Susie and the Banshees in there because it's like my favorite song of all time. And also, Frankie Goes to Hollywood for the Chase. I was like, I want to use that for the chase. So
Two Tribes came on. I was like, yes, that is the song.
Because the whole film is like a tribute to sort of 80s genre stuff.
Yeah.
From Mad Max to Escape from New York to Excalibur to you name it, it's all in there.
Yeah.
And the Warriors and everything like that. So it had to have like 80s music on it as well. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's so it so works because I love the contrast between London and the North. I absolutely love that. And Bob Hoskins, man.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Legend.
Absolute legend. Such a lovely, lovely man. Lovely man. And such a sad loss because he was fabulous. He's fabulous. I'm so glad I got to work with him because he's such a lovely man.
Were you going to say something?
Very sweet.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, because he was such a staple of my growing up. Obviously, I'm going to go to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but Long Kiss Goodnight, I think it was he was in. Like, there's lots of
Mermaids.
Oh, come off it! Get in the bin.
Mermaids is brilliant. It's got Cher in it.
We're not.
But yeah, well, so Long Good Friday, not Long Good.
Yeah.
So it's Long Good Friday.
Yeah.
Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
You know.
There's so many that
naming better films than Mermaids. There, I get you. I get you.
But like I wore out my VHS copy of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I hated Bob Hoskins, but I loved him at the same time. Like my mum used to say, when I found out that he was in other movies and he wasn't the same character, I used to get really upset when I was little. So. But I did it.
Yeah, and Michael McDowell as well was absolutely brilliant.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean,
again, awesome guy.
That's a hell of a cast. I've met him. My partner's met him because he's done a few of the horror conventions we do, and he said he's quite quiet, and I don't know why. I always feel like he would be very
voice out there.
Extrovert. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Very, very flamboyant. I think it's because of Clockwork Orange and watching that, you get this idea in your head.
I suppose he was. I try to remember. I haven't seen him in a few years, but yeah, he was quite quiet, I suppose. I mean, he's funny. He's very. Once you chat to him, I mean, literally the first thing he said to me, he came on to like. Had I met him before? No, I had met him before. I had spoken to him before, but when he arrived on set for the first day. And it was up in Scotland at this castle, and he walked onto set to when he looked around and he looked at the crew and he said, "All right, tell me who's fucking who." and I can't decide if it was because he wanted to know everybody's names, so he's like saying, like, "Who's fucking who," or if he wanted to get the gossip of who's fucking. To this day, I'm not entirely sure which one it was.
I can even hear that in his voice as well.
Yeah. What was it like working with Bob though? Having that time with him?
It was just a joy. I mean, so Bob would he was always hanging around set because he just said, even when he wasn't on acting or whatever, he just liked to hang around set and he was chatting to the crew all the time. You'd always just see him chatting away to people on set. And whenever I could talk to him, I was talking to him, and he just said, he says, my favorite place in the world to be is on set, and my favorite people in the world are crew. He says that whenever there's a problem in the world. Right, they shouldn't send in the army. They should send in a film crew because film crews get things done. Film crews know how to solve problems and everything. That's what they do. They go in. They've got lights. They've got electricians. They've got plumbers. They've got everything. They know how to get stuff done. That's why he used to solve problems in the world. So he just loved the business and loved the process, and it was a joy.
He was so good in this movie, and I fell madly in love with Eden, the character. The fact that a woman in that world potentially shouldn't be doing as well as what she was, but she just fell into it so naturally, and her strength was absolutely unreal. At the end of it, I was like, I just want to go on a journey with you now. Let me just get in the car with you.
Well, I mean, it's like Rona looked like she could pull that shit off. She was in great shape when we did the movie, and she was ripped. So
yeah, she was. That scene when she's dangling in her back, I was like, Jesus, lady. Yeah.
So she absolutely was convincing, which was very important to me because you see some action heroines or whatever, and it's like, well, I'm not sure that a punch from you isn't really going to hurt that much. But with Rona, it was like, yeah, she looked like she could handle herself.
Yeah, her tactics were absolutely brilliant, and I knew, I don't know why, but I looked at her and I went, you have to have done something in the Underworld series. And lo and behold, she looks exactly like Kate Beckinsale in Underworld, and she's been in the movie as well.
Yeah, she was in the third one, I think.
I think so. How did you make the leap then from the movies into the TV? So Hannibal, Game of Thrones, Constantine, just the leap into that sort of cinematic small.
To be honest, that was kind of luck. That I'd made Centurion.
Yeah.
And so that was in 2010. A lot of the crew from Centurion had gone off to work on Game of Thrones.
Right.
I'd seen it. I think I'd seen a trailer for season 1 of Game of Thrones in 2011, whatever it was. was going to come out, and I thought, this looks great. This looks right up my street. At that time, I was really struggling to get any films made because the two companies I'd worked with in the UK, Celador and Pathé, had basically folded operations as far as financing films was concerned. They weren't doing it anymore. And so I couldn't get a film made in the UK to save my life. But so I left it at that. I saw this trailer for Game of Thrones, and I approached the HBO or whatever about saying, well, I'd love to direct an episode of that. And they got back to me and said, sorry, when we have our own directors, and that was that. Never going to happen. Yeah. So that was it. I was sitting around like maybe a year, at least a year later, if not 2 years later, still trying to find work. And then one Saturday morning, I get a phone call out of the blue, and it's the producer of Game of Thrones, and she says, "How would you like to come and do an episode?" I said, "Well, what's the story?" So, well, we're gearing up to do the biggest episode ever with the Battle of Blackwater, and our director dropped out like at the last minute, and we need a director. And so what had happened was the stunt coordinator from Centurion and the horse master Camilla Napru from Centurion as well had both approached the producers and said, look, we made this film called Centurion, there's a battle sequence in that, Neil shot it in like a day, with hardly any extras and stuff like that, but look at it. And they gave the producer my phone number, and that was that. They called me up and said, come and save our bacon. And so I said, okay, well, I'd love to do it. Absolutely. You count me in. When do we start? Like, is it next month? And they said, no, you start Monday morning.
Oh my gosh.
You start Monday morning and you've got a week to prep it. And then we're shooting next week. And I was like, okay. So, but I was in there and it was great. And I took Sam McCurdy, my Geordie DP, along with me. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. But then, because I did that episode, because I did Game of Thrones, all of a sudden I was now in the TV. That was my TV job. So I was now in the TV world, and trying to think how that worked. So I did Black Sails next.
Yeah.
Off the back of my episode of Game of Thrones, I got Black Sails, and then did a few other things. Hannibal came about because I was my second episode of Game of Thrones. I got nominated for an Emmy for.
Rightly so.
Yeah, I rewatched that episode last night. I do have a bit of a question. Was it your choice or the DP's choice to do that? And was it in one shot, the continuous like 360, 180 shot of the fight taking place? Was it a consistent
360? Yeah.
Was it a consistent shot as well, or was it spliced and like?
No, it's one shot. It's one shot, and it was. No, it wasn't scripted either. It was not in the script. I'd gone to look at the location, this big fort.
Yeah.
And it's like it's really interesting around the outside, but it's just a flat thing in the middle. And I was like, well, that middle part's really boring. What if we could just have all the action around the sides, essentially? I mean, there would be in the middle, but the sides. And then it was like, well, what if we just put a big camera crane right in the middle there? And we did like some big shot all the way around. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be great to put at this point and we could like tie all the different characters in together in one shot? And I pitched it to the showrunners, and they were like, we love that idea. And I know it's not in the script, but we love it. If you can do it in a couple of hours, let's do it. And ultimately we did. We blocked it out, rehearsed it. I think we spent about an hour and a half rehearsing it. And then we got it in 7 takes.
Oh my God.
And,
that is unreal. I am a huge Game of Thrones fan. And the minute I saw that you were attached to these 2 episodes, firstly, Blackwater Bay is one of my favorite episodes, as it has and I can't believe you directed this scene when Tywin walks in to the Great Hall after it's all over and takes back King's Landing. I'm sitting there because Cersei's like ready to kill her and her children, and I'm like crying my eyes out. And then Charles Dance with that presence. Neil, that scene is beautiful.
He's the scariest man I've ever met on set.
I can believe that. Yeah.
He's like 6'5" or something like that, and that face and like this presence, everything. I was terrified of him, but then he actually turned out to be lovely. Because what had happened that day was he was scheduled literally to do that thing. He just had to walk in and say a line of dialogue, And for some reason, the first AD, and we knew we weren't going to get to that shot until like 5 o'clock in the evening. The first AD had called him in at 7 o'clock in the morning to rehearse that scene. And I was like, why would you do that? And he was like, well, this is how it's done. And he was like, and Dance was not particularly happy about it. It was like, I'm at 7 o'clock, I'm not going to be used all day. He came in, I had a chat with him, I apologized, and I was like, oh fuck, he's going to be in such a shit mood. But he came back later on, he was in costume, he was ready, he just said, whatever you want me to do, just tell me. You're the director, put me where you want to put me, tell me what you want to say, I'll do it. He did it, boom, no complaints, with a smile, and then he left. And I was just like, oh, thank God for that, because he could have made it so miserable. But no, really it's just crazy stuff like that, yeah. So yeah, we got the 360 shot, was super proud of that. So I was at the Emmy Awards party afterwards, the HBO party, and Brian Fuller approached me and said, we'd love you to come and do an episode of Hannibal. We've got this episode coming on, you should come and do an episode of Hannibal. And yeah, quite often at these kind of things, not just these events, but like in LA particularly, the amount of people who come up to you and say, oh, we'd love you to come and do this, blah, blah, party, and like, you should come and work with us, and blah, 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 and you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
There's so much bullshit going around that town, it's unbelievable. Brian Fuller is not one of these people. Like the next day, the offer for the job came through to my agents, and it was just like, it was real. It was just like, oh, this guy's awesome. So yeah, it's good team, and I got to do Hannibal as well, which is amazing.
That was a hell of an episode because it was the Red Dragon episode as well, wasn't it?
Well, that was the other thing. Was like, shit, it's the Red Dragon episode. A lot of bit of pressure on there because like having two versions already, including Michael Mann's. Was like, shit, how do I approach this different? But yeah, they were great because they were, Brian took me to one side. He said, secretly, this is an art house film disguised as a TV series. So like, if you have any like really, really outrageous ideas, let's just throw them in the hat and I'll say yes or no. And so I got to do weird stuff like creating dragon wings out of the red strings behind Will. That was an idea I came up with, and then having the film wrap around the red dragon's head and light projects from his eye onto the walls and stuff like that to show what was going on in his head. And it was just like, yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. So funny stuff like that. It's great.
I can't believe you did Red Dragon. I had to stop watching Hannibal season 1 because of my love for Red Dragon. Red Dragon is my favorite book of all time. And I didn't get the Will Graham character. I just wasn't feeling him. It didn't feel like my Will Graham. And I was like, I'm just not into it. So Dan was like, it's the Red Dragon episode. I was like, oh my God, what?
It was great. It was great. Another famous monster of sorts.
Yeah. So if you could have directed any movie, you've probably been asked this 1,000 times, but if you could direct any movie from going back as far as you can think of to now, which wasn't one of yours, what would it be?
Oh Lord, I don't know. I'd love to. I'd love to direct a James Bond movie.
That'd be cool.
Definitely like to do that. I'd love to direct an Alien movie. I think I wish I'd done something instead of Prometheus. That would have been interesting.
The less said about that one, the better.
Absolutely.
It has a place.
Or a Star Wars movie, that'd be good. But no, I think it's something. My sensibilities take me to the world of Alien, and that the darkness and terror of space.
Yeah.
And that the first movie I think captured so brilliantly, and none of the others, even Aliens, which is a masterpiece, but in a different kind of way, none of them managed to capture that, the weirdness and the terror of space so well. That's what I'd like to try and do. So like an Alien. I don't know, whichever, Prometheus. But it wouldn't be Prometheus. I wouldn't make that film because it was shit.
It really was. It was fucking garbage. The fact that the turny thingy cell just stepped to the side, man. Come on.
Spaceship full of idiots.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Just go back to the Game of Thrones just a second. Because you are not being I have this moment in time with Melanie Hill where I never told her that she said one of my most favorite lines in my movie history, and I was like, I'm not having that with Neil Marshall. I need to talk about Game of Thrones just for a second. You did the two. I've seen the two episodes you did are two of the most cinematically beautiful episodes that ever came out of Game of Thrones. With the second one, now I know you've just said what you said with the first one and how you got that, but with the second one, did you get to choose that, or was that something that you were just given?
What do you mean?
Like, as in, you were like, did you get to choose what episode you got to do next with Game of Thrones, or were you just like, this is your next one?
No, it was because I'd done Blackwater, so they knew I was good at doing battles and stuff and scale stuff. So they brought me back to do that one because it was the next big scale battle sequence. And mine were kind of, I don't know if at the time anyway, mine were the only two episodes that sort of took place in one location.
Yeah, you didn't leave.
Jumping all over the place. So I don't know. I think primarily it was because of Blackwater they brought me back for that one, because it was like, we've got another big battle. You know, and the decision was made to shoot it at night. I think it may have been written during the day or something like that, but which I think gave us more scope and made it look nicer. And then you know, once you put the flaming arrows and stuff like that in at night, it looks great. Yeah,
the sea going up in green is just it is so
all that
beautiful.
stuff at night as well.
And you killed Liam's son.
Yeah, well, I got to blow Liam off the boat.
Yeah,
didn't
you did.
I didn't kill him though, just blew him up. But I mean, but with both of those episodes, they look beautiful at night. For filming wise, it meant filming them usually in the pouring rain in a quarry in Belfast in whatever it was, November. It's sort of freezing cold and up to our knees in mud for like 4 weeks. But amazing crew and amazing cast, great experiences.
It was crazy when I saw the budget for the Watchers episode, because it's stated as being $8 million for that one episode. I mean, my brain can't even contemplate. Like, you can see it for the cast members and the set but your brain goes to like for one.
Well, I hate to alarm you even more, but it was more like 18.
Was it really?
Whoa.
For that episode, yeah.
Wow. I mean, I think it's one of those things, they're worth it, because you deliver so much more with it. Obviously, don't get me wrong, smaller budget films, they do their job. They become cult films. It doesn't matter how they're shot, they work. But the new trend of having these like mini cinematic movies in an hour or so, that HBO has been able to sort of pull off more now than they have been before. It's like you're watching a movie every time you tune in, and this one felt more like a movie than some of the other episodes I'd seen, and it had you on your seat, but you were gutted it was only like 51 minutes long.
Yeah,
you wanted more.
Yeah, well, they did something unusual with those last two episodes of that season, Watchers on the Wall, and then I think it was The Children or something was the last episode. They released them on IMAX.
Right.
I saw them in an IMAX cinema in Canada, actually, where I was at the time, and it was only out for like a week or 2 weeks, but they put them on an IMAX screen, so you could go and see those two episodes on an IMAX screen, and they really held up. I mean, they looked astonishing on a huge screen. They really held up. So, but they never did that with any of the others as well. I don't know, maybe it was an experiment and it didn't work out that well financially for them, so they didn't do it. But at least I got to see my episode on an IMAX screen, and I was like, wow, that's astonishing.
I remember watching it, the Watchers on the Wall episode, and just being in awe of what I was seeing. It was essentially a mini movie, and it was incredible, but it was incredibly sad at the same time.
Yeah, also, like, I make a point of, like, whatever I'm doing, I try and make it as cinematic as possible. No matter, how big or small it is. It's just, how you frame stuff and set stuff up and shooting everything kind of widescreen and, going large with stuff. I like to do that.
But also having your previous knowledge of editing, you're obviously editing it in your head as well as you're directing it at the same time, thinking, right, well, if I shoot all of this, I know I can reduce it to this without losing too much of what I initially want. I think that would you say that has helped you massively when you're envisaging scenes before they've even played out, like even when you're just
no, definitely
them and things? Yeah,
Yeah, because whenever I'm directing a scene, I've got some sense of how I intend to cut it together in my head. It's just I can't not. It's like it's all ingrained up here. So yeah, I think with another one of the shots on Game of Thrones was when Jon Snow is cradling his dying love in his arms, and which because I got to kill off quite a few important people on that episode.
Yes, you did.
But she was the important one. She was the biggest one. And I said at this moment, because of this battle raging around him, or whatever, I think when he holds her in his arms like that, I need to go slow mo because I need to separate it from the background. And he's like, so the sound will fade away, and it's just them in their moment. If we play at normal speed, it'll feel weird if we don't have the sound in the background, and then that'll just kill the moment. And so after a lot of toing and froing with the writers, because they were like, oh, we never use slow mo in Game of Thrones, we don't do it. It's not a thing. And I said, let me for this. Just let me for this. It'll make sense in the end. And they did, and they eventually saw it, and they were saying, I think that's the best shot of the whole series. They're like,
it really was. Everything's just drowned out, and it's just. But you know that because obviously what you've just seen, there's a huge rage and war behind them, and it's just them in this moment. Just after Ollie gives these little to Jon Snow.
Yeah,
you did get to kill a lot of people off in that episode. You got one to run through the door and flatten the guys behind.
Yeah, we got the guys in the tunnel. We got a couple of guys up on top of the wall. Somebody got an arrow through his neck. Sam's mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant episode. Well, Neil, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do have one thing to ask because we are a monster podcast.
Yes, of course.
What is your favorite all-time favorite monster?
Well, I suppose the obvious choice would be like a werewolf or something like that. But I actually think the monster that's got to me the most is probably Alien. Just in terms of and I mean like the whole life cycle. I mean everything from the egg to the face hugger to the chest burster to the fully developed thing. It's just like. Just that in itself is like we have an organism that's made up of that is actually several organisms, which is like that's an alien concept in its own right. And then you have the space jockey who's like is grown out of his chair and makes no sense, which is one of the reasons I hate Prometheus because it tried to make sense of that. It tried to make sense of it, and it killed the whole mystery. But no, I think the xenomorph from Alien. I actually and that life cycle as well is something that really interests me. When it comes to aliens, as much as I love it, what James Cameron ultimately did was give the whole alien thing an insect life cycle, was like having a queen that lays eggs. It's like, well, that's something that exists on Earth. We have queen bees and we have queen ants and stuff like that, the worker ants. So that took away the alienness of it. So that was a bit of a shame. I kind of like the idea that in the first film that human bodies would become the eggs, that they'd go into that they degenerate and become the eggs. I think that it was done as an outtake in the film, but never used. But as a weird life cycle, I thought that was way more alien and interesting than having the queen and the eggs and the stuff from Aliens. All that said, I mean, Aliens is a masterpiece, and I'm not knocking the film, but it's a little bit more earthbound. I think Alien is creepier, but the xenomorph is a monster classic. I mean, there's been nothing else like it, and any number of impersonators.
Yeah, I mean Geiger's designs were just.
Well, I think that's part of it. Is that it all came from the brain of a madman. I mean, Giga is just astonishing. It's just in his work. It's just like what the, and there's nobody ever been before or since like that.
You look at his every design he's ever done. Like even if you buy one of his art books or you go online and you look through his images. None of them make sense on initial look. There is like you say, I think that's the thing with the layers. The more you look, the more you see. And the same with the alien, the initial, it's not just the alien, there's the face huggers, there's everything else that comes with it. Yeah. I know he had a few issues with with the way that obviously Cameron had repurposed the Queen or used the Queen. He wasn't really keen on that. He was one of his favorite things. But ultimately, it led to him having a huge following of his art. I know he has a museum in, I think it's Switzerland.
It is. Yeah, I've been there. It's amazing.
Oh,
I mean, everybody keeps telling me to go, and it's one of those things where I'm just like,
well, it's the museum is great, but it's also got the bar and
Right.
the Giga bar, which is it's all the chairs and the walls, everything are like designed by Giga. So it's bizarre and wonderful.
I need to go.
well, you cleared up an argument by just saying xenomorph, because a lot of people
Why?
call it a xenomorph.
Oh, never
Yeah,
occurred to me to call it a xenomorph.
xenomorph. Yeah, I would say xenomorph, but some people call it xenomorph. We did a whole episode on, not just on the two names, but a whole episode on aliens. And
each to their own, you know. You say potato, I say potato.
I say xenomorph.
And so have you seen The Lair yet?
Yes. Yeah, I saw it. Which reminds me, I do have a question about that. One of our like hardcore listeners, Mike, wanted to ask you if, because he felt that, was The Lair more CGI heavy than your practical effects previous movies?
No.
Was it not?
No, we did. It was all men in suits.
Because we were having this debate this weekend, because Newcastle Comic Con has just gone. It was on last weekend, and so he was talking to me because I was working it, and he was saying, "Can you ask him if he prefers practical over the, you know, like CGI effects? What one's his favorite?" I said, "Yeah, of course I can." He said, "Because I'm," and then we started talking about The Lair, and I think it was me that might have thought it was more CGI heavy. It was probably me, to be fair.
No, I mean, as a rule, I'll always prefer practical. I just think that, you know, if you can pull it off, it looks so much better. It will stand the test of time. CG is an amazing tool and is great for enhancing those things, and that's what we did with The Lair. So we did some enhancement of. There's a couple of shots where they open their jaws really long, which was just CG enhancing.
Yeah.
And there's this thing where the tentacles fly out of. Most of the tentacles were practical, but there's a couple of shots of CG tentacles either shooting out of their heads or something like that. And they're split-second stuff. But 95% of those creatures is practical. And even shots where there's a whole bunch of them, that was just basically one guy, you know, in different places, in one suit, running around in different places, and then we combine them all to look like there's a whole bunch. So it's like CG or compositing, but not the creation of a creature in the machine, which invariably I think never looks as good as practical.
No, practical always holds up. Always.
And it's always that thing of, like, you know, when people ask me, like, what's your favorite creatures, or what you know, it's listed the greatest monsters in movie history, or, like, you know, Karloff's Frankenstein, or Alien, or Predator, or The Thing, or American Werewolf, and they're all practical.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that anybody's naming a CG monster as being one of the greatest monsters of all time, because, well, can anybody?
No.
So no, I don't even think we've had anybody on, or we've even discussed any movies the way we've gone, yeah, that was really, really cool. We haven't, have we?
No, we haven't. No, not at all. Everything's. I love practical effect. Like Ghostbusters is my all-time favorite. It's everything to us. And I remember as a kid watching the making of it and seeing Sigourney Weaver hang from a rod while being turned, and I was like, "That's how they do this stuff." And I wanted to know more and more. I love practical effects, and I think when we did the Alien episode, I learned about the Queen. And she's a big, massive puppet.
Yeah.
Puppeteered by nearly 15, 16 people. And I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah. It's like, but it's things like, you know, CG Yoda versus practical Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back, or CG Jabba versus practical Jabba. It's like, you know, the practical just wins every time.
Yeah.
I imagine it's got to be harder for the actors to respond to a tennis ball on a stick than it is to a physical thing, you know.
Yeah, very much so. It's very difficult for them.
What about the work that, like, Andy Serkis does, though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's like almost, is that classed as CG, or is that still practical because he's still behind there?
Well, that's a better use of it, because, you know, it's so much of it is based on him and his performance. Definitely, but and they are the best versions of those kind of things for sure.
Yeah, that is true.
Andy's on set acting it out there, but then they go off and they do the motion capture, don't they? And then they composite over the top. So yeah,
it's still him essentially.
Yeah. So they've got something to react to, because I mean, obviously, Charlotte had to, when she was doing the lair. That was always been my thought with actresses and actors that have to deal with a ping pong ball on a stick. It must take away so much of how they can emote, how much feeling they can give to a scene, because they're constantly, there's no other person to play off, there's no other you can't envisage the scale of what you're looking at, or the, like, when they go back and watch it after it's finished and they've put everything in, I bet they sit there and they kick themselves and they're like, oh god, I wish I'd done this or I'd done that. I look like I've done, but if they're there in practical, then you can retake as many times as you need to get to there. So I've always not pitied actors and actresses, but I've always felt for them, in that respect, that they can't quite get to where they need to with the tennis ball on a stick.
It's tricky. I know that, certainly when they're doing like first, Jurassic Park and stuff like that, or when they have been having to deal with tennis balls on sticks, but it's not easy.
Yeah,
it's not easy for them.
Oh well, I don't know if there's anything else I've got to go through, Dan.
No, I mean, we've discovered that Soul's a universal monster now, so I'm happy.
That's all she wanted to know. That's all she wanted to know.
Fine. I'm fine with that label.
Oh, Neil, it's been absolutely amazing having you join us. You are our first proper big guest. First proper.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Oh, I'm very proud.
Awful, it's amazing for us.
Yeah,
the amount of messages I've had over the last week, like, when's he coming on? I'm like, it's very soon.
Oh, that's great. No, it's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.
And if I haven't said it already a million times, Dog Soldiers is fucking amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No. Right, so this episode is out on Monday at our new time on YouTube of 8 o'clock, and that'll be going forward every Monday. The audio for this episode and all of our other ones are available on Tuesdays. If you can go back and give us a like, hearts, what do they do on audio?
iTunes and Spotify.
Whatever you do on iTunes and Spotify, please go and do that. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. All the descriptions for Nerdy Up North, Monsters Up North, and Bleeding Marvelous are down below. Next week, Dan, what's next week?
It's American Psycho next week.
Oh, if Neil wasn't here, I would be singing at this moment in time, but I'm not going to put him through that. Yes, we're going into the world of Patrick Bateman, or are we? Who knows?
It's not a place I want to stay.
Good movie.
Yeah, it's really good.
American Psycho next week. So again, thank you so much, Neil, for joining us. Really appreciate it massively.
You're welcome. Cheers, man. Thank you for having me.
Right, if there's nothing else to say goodbye, Dan.
Bye, Dan.
Stay spooky, everyone. Bye.